Four teenagers went camping beside a peaceful Finnish lake. By the next morning, 3 were gone forever, and the only survivor couldn't fully explain what had happened. More than 6 decades later, one question still surrounds Lake Bodom: who was responsible? It was June 4, 1960, when 4 teenagers traveled to Lake Bodom, near Espoo, Finland. The group included 2 15-year-old girls, Tulikki Michaela and Ermeli Björklund, and 2 18-year-old boys, Nils Gustafsson and Seppo Boiman. They set up a small tent near the lake and settled in for what was supposed to be an ordinary summer camping trip. They spent the evening together before eventually going to sleep. Everything appeared normal. But sometime during the night, something happened that would turn this peaceful location into one of Finland's most famous mysteries. The following morning, the campsite was discovered in disturbing circumstances. 3 members of the group had died, while Nils Gustafsson was found seriously injured but alive. He was taken to hospital, and investigators immediately began trying to understand what had happened during the night. The investigation was difficult from the beginning. Gustafsson survived, but his memory of the events was incomplete. He could remember parts of the evening, but he could not provide investigators with a complete account of what happened afterward. There was no clear eyewitness who could identify the person responsible, leaving investigators with a complicated puzzle. Authorities examined the campsite and surrounding area for clues. But despite their efforts, no clear answer emerged. The person responsible appeared to have disappeared without leaving investigators with enough evidence to identify them. As the years passed, several people became subjects of suspicion. One of the most frequently discussed names was Valdemar Gillström, a local kiosk owner. According to accounts from people familiar with the area, Gillström had a difficult relationship with campers and was sometimes described as hostile toward them. These stories eventually made him one of the names connected to the investigation. However, suspicion was never enough to establish his involvement. There was no conclusive evidence proving that Gillström was responsible. He died in 1969, taking any possibility of directly questioning him with him. Another name that later became associated with the case was Hans Assmann, a German-born man living in Finland. Reports about his behavior around the time of the incident attracted attention, and investigators considered whether he could have been connected to the case. But once again, there was no definitive evidence establishing his involvement. For decades, the mystery remained unresolved. The case became part of Finnish criminal history, while people continued to debate what might have happened during those missing hours at Lake Bodom. In 2004, Finnish authorities arrested Nils Gustafsson, the only surviving member of the group. After spending decades being regarded as a victim, Gustafsson was now being treated as a possible suspect. Prosecutors developed a theory that a personal conflict may have played a role. They suggested that Gustafsson could have been responsible and then presented himself as another victim. It was an extraordinary accusation because the person who had survived the night was now facing the possibility of being held responsible for what happened. In 2005, the case finally reached court. Prosecutors presented their theory and examined the available evidence, while Gustafsson's defense argued that there was not enough reliable evidence to prove his involvement. After examining the case, the court reached its decision on October 7, 2005. Nils Gustafsson was found not guilty. He was acquitted, and the case once again returned to uncertainty. The verdict did not reveal who was responsible. Instead, it left the central mystery exactly where it had been for decades. Several theories continue to surround Lake Bodom. Some people believe that one of the historical suspects may have been responsible. Others believe the person involved was never identified. Some continue to question the events surrounding Gustafsson, while others believe there simply wasn't enough evidence to ever determine the truth. But there is an important difference between suspicion and proof. Despite decades of investigation, no one has been conclusively convicted for what happened at Lake Bodom. Today, Lake Bodom remains a real place, surrounded by the same peaceful Finnish landscape. To someone visiting the area, it may look like an ordinary lake. But behind that quiet scenery is a case that has fascinated Finland for generations. Four teenagers went there expecting a simple summer camping trip. By the next morning, everything had changed. 3 lives were lost, 1 teenager survived, and the complete explanation for that night remains unknown. More than 60 years later, the monster of Lake Bodom is still remembered because of one unanswered question. Who was responsible? And perhaps the most unsettling part of the entire story is that, after all these years, we still don't have a definitive answer.